Okay, so you can see for number 50, we're now dealing with a hyperbola. And if you recall with the hyperbola, the leading variable kind of dictates where the hyperbola is going to be located. So being that that's y squared, that means that the foci has to also sit on the y. So whatever it is, it's going to be 0 and some y value. So right away, noticing that the y squared is ahead of the x squared, so it's swapped. The other thing to consider is, also before I forget, is that c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. And that's another big hint in the answer to this. So first of all, second of all, in this case, let's look at the foci answers, and you notice that this one is x0, so that's not it. So we can rule this one out, this one out. This one's also x0, we can rule that one out. So your answer choice has to be B, and we know that because c squared is equal to 100 plus 121 in this question, which is going to give you c equals the square root plus or minus of 221. And so that confirms that. The other thing is the vertices. You notice the vertices are going to be plus or minus the square root of 100, which is 10. So plus or minus 10. And again, that has to lay as well. So for the vertices as well, this would be 0 and some y value, plus or minus of that y value. And so that definitely confirms that B is our answer for number 50. And that's because it's a hyperbola. The hyperbola has a different behavior than does the other. Okay, so for this equation, you can see that we have to match the equation to the graph in 51. And so we can see that this is a hyperbola, and we can see that also the hyperbola opens on the x. So I can rule this out, I can rule this out, and it's either going to be C or D. Now, if you notice, the square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. Here's 3, negative 3, here's positive 3. This one is using the 4 because it's a y value, and the y value is secondary, so that's not it either. So your answer choice should be C for that. For 52, we have the foci at 8, 0 and negative 8, 0, and the vertices at negative 6 and positive 6. So for 52, it's very clear that the answer choice apparently should be D. And you know that because the vertices are giving it away with, first of all, the fact that it's sitting on the x. Notice that in our ordered pair, it's always x, y. And the vertices are sitting on the x, so the x has to be the leading term with the square of that value. So that works. So we can rule C and D out, or I'm sorry, B and C out, and now that leaves A as a contender. Here's the problem. 36 plus 64 is not going to work. But the 36 and 28 is 64, the square root of which would be plus or minus 8, hence the foci. Because remember, c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared for the hyperbola, which means that 36 plus 28 is equal to 64. The square root of 64 would give us our plus and minus 8 for the foci. For 53, if you notice, in this case, endpoints of the transverse axis, we have an asymptote at 3, 8. Okay, and in this case, your answer choice should be B. And again, because the y is your leading term, so that's a big hint. And given that the asymptote is 3 over 8, it's basically 36 over 256 reduced. Right? And so that's how you know that that should be the answer. Alright, number 54. Again, this is a y squared lead because it's opening up this way. So this can be reduced to not an answer. That's not an answer either. If you notice in 54 as well, as we analyze the graph, this is sitting at the point, let's see here, the center point is 2, negative 1. which means that we shifted over the 0 from 0, 0 over to down 1. That means at this point, which is one of our suggestions for the tip here, has to come up a point and go over 2. So technically this was the original position of this point here. That tells me that A is the answer, because that would indicate that 3 squared is 9, plus or minus, regardless, right? Of 3 squared is 9. And again, how I figured that out, that it was not the D, is simple. The original hyperbola would have had this as a center. Notice that it went over 1, 2 units, so 1, 2 this way, right? And then from here it went down 1 point. So if I go up a unit and over to this way, the opposite, I'm back at 3. Alright, for number 55, for 55, your answer here, you have to complete the square. So you have, in essence, I'm going to do the work down here. So you have x squared plus 4x plus 4, because I took half of 4 and squared it, plus, actually it's a negative, so I'm actually going to do minus, sorry, my bad, minus. Here, so minus, okay, and I'll do minus of y squared plus 2y, half of 2 is 1, so plus 1, and this is equal to negative 2 on this side, so that means that I have to add 4, and I have to add 1 to balance out the equation. So when I'm done factoring this, I should have, in this case, x plus 2 as a square. Alright, and this results in minus y minus 1, because remember it's a negative, so I have to account for that. And this should equal 1, hence 4 minus. This one is actually a negative. So 4 minus 3 will give me 1. Okay, and so, with that said, this answer choice should be C. This is incorrect because it has a wrong sign. This is incorrect because it starts with a Y. Okay. Alright, and same thing for this one. Just have the wrong leading term. This is the same as the other question. I'm not going to bother with it. You can look at your answer key and see what the answer is for that. For 57, we have a hyperbola again with a leading x squared, so the x is the leading term. We're supposed to match this to the correct graph. And so given that, the correct graph would have to be with the asymptote 2/3 plus or minus, and D would be your answer. Obviously you would eliminate A and B. Okay, and again notice that it's 2/3 x for the asymptote. Notice that this is the y, this is the x term. So A, in this case, 4/9. We're taking the square root of those two numbers, hence 2/3. Alright, this is more of the same. I'm not going to do number 58. You can look up the answer there and make reason that through. I've already shown you an example of that. For this one, it says find the location of the center. So we can start by looking at the center for 59. And it should be 4, 1 for the center. Remember, they're always the opposite, so this is correct. So is this. So we can rule out A and C. Now, here's the hint. The x comes first. Since the x comes first, that also is telling me that the vertice has to have a shift in its own right. So in this case, it would have to be answer choice D. would have to be answer choice D. The other consideration is the foci. That's another helpful hint. It is going to be sitting at -1, not +1, which is why I immediately ruled that out. Okay? Because remember, there's a shift in this one. We're not centered in. We're not in the center is not 0, 0. It's 4, 1. Alright, for number 60, in this case, your answer choice is dependent on how we solve this. So we're going to have to divide this by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4. So you end up with y plus 4 squared over 4 minus x minus 1 squared equal to 1. This is over 1. Okay, so at this point we evaluate the center. So for number 60, the center should be located at 1, 2. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2. So this is correct. This is the only one that's correct. Everything else, if you notice, that's shifted to the right, that shifted up, that shifted down. This one is correct. Because we're going to take the square root of 4, which is 2 in this case. We're shifting over. And then the 1 is a plus 1 in our case. That's how you know. For 61, I'm going to go ahead and continue because these have been pretty quick. It says find the focus and the directrix of the parabola with the given equation. And so this is an x squared equals 16y. Remember, these are x squared equals 4 py in this case. And so for this one, the y term has to be the leading value for the focus. So it's not any of those two. And if we're solving for 4p, remember p helps us find the focus. So if 4p has to be 16, then p has to be, in this case, 4, meaning our directrix, in this case, y equals -4. So the answer choice for this would be B. 62 I'm not doing. You can do that one. Look up your answer choice. It's the same thing as 61. And okay, so find the standard form of the equation of the parabola using the information given. And so for this one, our vertex is 1, -6. Our focus is 1, -3. Okay, so that's telling me that this has to be an x -1 squared. And with the -6 and the focus at 1, -3, this would equal 12. Yeah, 12 plus times y plus 6. I'm getting the y plus 6 from the vertex. Remember, they're always opposites. That's where these two values come from. That's where this value comes from, and this value comes from here. Given the focus is 1, -3, the -3 is what's helping me in this case to find the actual value of the of this term. And remember, it's always 4py. And so in this case, because this is x minus 1 squared, you'll end up with a 12, positive 12. Okay. I'm going to let you do this one for 64. Let's take a look at it. See if you can solve it. It's the same as 63. 65, 66, find the vertex and focus the directrix of the parabola. So now we're dealing with parabolas. Okay, so for 65, okay, so for 65, The first thing we want to do is let's look for the vertex first, and that'll help you rule out the answers. So if you notice that this is a y squared equals 4px, okay, and so this means that x is 3 for the vertex. This should be x is equal to 3, and y should be equal to 1 based on this. So let's rule out this one and this one, because that's a -3, -1. And D, C, and D are contenders now. Now, the next thing to consider is the directrix. Alright, so that's easy to solve. We know that that's got to be 4. So for 65, your answer should be D. You can also tell that if you have a -4p for the focus, in this case, that's fairly easy to tell by here, just using the equation. I'm not doing 66, that's the same thing as that. You could do that yourself. Here we're graphing the parabola. Again, this is a y squared equals 4py. So, looking at 67 in terms of the values, and this has an origin, what do I call it, an origin, vertex at -1, 1. That looks like it's exactly on 1. I'm going to go with this one. Alright, I'm comfortable with that. And so I would go with D on this one. Answer choice D. Okay, for 68, give the first 5 terms of the arithmetic sequence. So we're kind of throwing this back. They're telling you that a sub 1 is 9. And so you use the recursive formula here if you wish. And in this case, your answer choice, if you start with 9, you go up 7. You go up 7 again, 7, 7, so B. Alright, for 69, find a sub 28, given a sub 1 and the difference of -5. So we use our formula a sub n equals a sub 1 plus n minus 1 times the common difference. So if I'm looking for a sub 28, this is equal to 8 plus 27 times -5. Alright, and 69 should be -127. Alright, and I'm going to stop at, well, I think I'm going to keep going because this is pretty quick. I think I'm going to stop here for this video. I'll start at 70 for the next one. Thank you.